Hello and welcome to this episode for the Survivor Diaries. This is the second video that we're doing regards the lockdown following the COVID-19 crisis in 2020. So the previous video that we did was towards the end of March, which was the beginning of lockdown. And where we are now, we're on the 19th of July 2020, so we're just coming where lockdown is being eased, things are not fully up and running, and it's this point where we're going to review where we are following lockdown. Okay, so it's the impact of lockdown, the second video about the impact of lockdown. As I always do, I'm just going to give a couple of disclaimers right at the start of this video. So the first one, I am a family lawyer in England and Wales, so if you are outside of England and Wales, any law that I refer to may not apply to you. And secondly, always, if I'm giving any advice about child arrangements, I have to disclaim that this is general advice. Every situation is unique, and it's always best to take legal advice on your unique situation when you can. And there are places where you can get free legal advice. I keep plugging Rights of Women. They're brilliant. They've helped me in the past. A lot of solicitors will offer a free initial consultation, and quite a few solicitors will have a look at cases just to point you in the right direction. So that's very helpful. General advice. So the last episode, quite a way back, we talked about the impact of lockdown. It's now starting to ease. It is Sunday the 19th of July and I have been working this morning. This is not a big change for me in the lockdown, and a lot of my colleagues who work with child arrangements or public law children proceedings are both saying the same thing, they're all saying the same thing, which is that it is incredibly busy at the moment. So within this video we're going to look at the reasons for that and the impact, the concern that I have as to how it's going to impact with child arrangements and domestic abuse, which is what this video series is about. How it's impacted then just generally in society, lockdown, well obviously the movement of children has been affected, so that applies to anybody separated where they have either no order in place but they've got the arrangements informally, or they've got an order in place. What do you do with lockdown? And there was clarification quite quickly about that it did allow children to move between households. It did say may move between households because obviously there are some people who are having to isolate because of special conditions in particular, and it's very circumstance specific, isn't it? I think that with hindsight, that's what the courts are going to be looking at going forwards, if there have been any potential breaches. That's answering a question that I've been asked quite a lot. So that the courts will be looking at the unique circumstances of the case, if there was a legitimate or justified reason for withholding contact or anything like that. That's what I think the courts will approach that with going forward if they're dealing with any kind of breaches or enforcement. Excellent, I should have switched those off at the start. Directly impacting child arrangements and the movement of children between separated parents. And of course these videos also look at the child arrangements process and domestic abuse, and it's widely recognised that the incidences of domestic abuse have increased quite dramatically, and I'm using statistics from people, Counting Dead Women, Karen Ingala Smith, the social media that she has. I've seen a Zoom meeting, I've been present in a Zoom meeting where she was covering the increase in domestic homicides between this period in 2020 compared to, say, the last 5 years, and I think that was in April of this year. So there's an increase in domestic abuse. We're seeing more domestic homicides reported than there were. In addition to this, the lockdown has had a direct impact on the justice system. So obviously the courts are closed, and they have been really quick to move to remote hearings and hearing the parties remotely. So to be fair to the family justice system, they have adapted very quickly in this respect. And at the time of doing this episode, hearings are still being conducted remotely, and we've had guidance produced, which I will refer to now, and we're going to put a link to this below, which is by from the judiciary, and it's the protocol regarding remote hearings. So that's if it's a telephone hearing, if it's a Skype hearing, and what the court is expected to do in those circumstances. So we're putting a link to that below if people need to refer to that or to see what should be happening with what they've got as a remote hearing in place of an actual hearing in person. It's an additional complication with the processing of cases though. So some hearings are not dealt with remotely. So more complicated hearings, fact-finding hearings, anything where evidence is contested is likely to be something that the courts don't feel that they can deal with remotely. And this again is going to be case specific. There is case law about care proceedings, contested final hearings. That's a no, because you need to have people present in the court and to be able to actually look at evidence in a certain detail that you can only do in person in the courtroom. So there are big disruptions to the family justice system, I think is what I'm saying. All cases that I'm involved with, whether that's with my own private client base or if it's that I'm helping people through a pro bono basis, all of those are affected. And Sir Andrew McFarlane has said that he's the president of the family division, has said in June that at the moment it looks like remote hearings are going to be in place until the spring of 2021. So we'll put those links to the protocol there that might help you with some of the practicalities. As a piece of general advice, communicate with the court. If you're a litigant in person, you can call the court, they've still got staff there. You can find the emails to send to the family section of the court. Ask about hearings in advance. Look on the orders that you've received about what the next hearing is expected to be, what format, and see what you have to do. Do you have to provide a telephone number to the court beforehand? And hopefully you'll find some information there, but if you haven't, please just get in touch with the court direct. We will actually link the Court Finder website as well underneath this episode so that you can actually see, if you put in the name of where you are, it brings up all of the court details. And it also has information about whether that court is operational, if it has staff in it, if it is actually running for hearings, etc. Okay, we've got a combination of all cases questioning the movement of children during lockdown. Where there is domestic abuse, this has been amplified or emphasised, and this is looking generally at what I'm seeing in the media, and I probably agree with this. It's going to be because of the intensity of the domestic situation. If everybody is at home, the abusive personality will have more control, and in a bigger sense they'll also feel like they don't have control over the lockdown situation. It's a difficult time for the abusive personality, therefore they're going to likely want to extend their control over the household, and therefore, in my humble opinion, this is going to account for the rise in domestic homicide, the rise in domestic abuse incidents. Also, people don't have access to safe spaces, so they can't go to work, they can't receive domestic abuse support, talk to other people about the situation as easily. Back to the family justice system, what's happening with that now? Well, we have a backlog. This is of course going to be a problem, and I've already referred in these videos many times to Sir Andrew McFarlane's comments in July 2019, and he actually said that the family courts are running up a down escalator due to the increase in the volume of cases. Now that was in July last year, so as you can, I may be stating the obvious, this is going to be worse now because we've got a lot of cases that weren't able to be heard properly. We've got an increase of volume even more because domestic abuse incidents are increasing, so therefore that's going to bring things back to the family court again. This does worry me because if the family justice system were already struggling to deal with cases, and by that, referring back to my other videos, I mean we deal with cases of domestic abuse allegations properly, and that means evidence checking and using the practice direction fact finding really quickly if that's what needs to happen to get to the bottom of it. And the common counter allegation. The counter allegation quite often to allegations of domestic abuse is that it's all in the head and it's all made up and this is actually the other parent alienating me. Both of these, if you know my videos, I say can be addressed by going to the evidence checking process. If there is no good reason for contact to have been stopped, for the relationship with one parent not to be supported, then that's going to come out, isn't it? If there's not good reason, as much as if there is good reason. It's all down to this evidence checking process that the court needs to do from the start. The court could go down that route, but it costs court time, court energy, and there's a lot of pressure on the court because of the volume of cases, and this is previous, to push the parents, other pressures as well, very pro-contact, etc., etc., pushing the parents towards agreement about contact and avoiding the contested whether or not there was abuse element. Now that, to me, is a circular problem. I say throughout these videos that domestic abuse will always continue through the child arrangements unless it's addressed by the perpetrator. This is because it's continuing as a form of post-separation control. And the abusive personality will use the children, use the arrangements for the children to continue their abuse of the other parent. This is something that's not well understood at the family courts. Hopefully this is something that will change, and I'm going to go on just at the end to explain why that might be. So the difficulty is, because this always continues, if the court don't deal with it, then as soon as the process is finished, the abuse carries on again. During the process, of course, we've got the liar, so he minimises or denies, and yes, I've been gender specific. He minimises or denies that there was abuse. The case is wrongly referred to as high conflict parenting, and this is a really important distinction again that I've got in the videos. High conflict parenting is a mutual thing, and both parties can be responsible for changing something that's mutual. They both have to change their behaviour, they both have to work at changing that so they can move forward as co-parents for the benefit of the children. And that's when it's high conflict, okay, coming from both sides. Domestic abuse in the co-parenting relationship is the behaviour of one parent towards the other, and that other is probably doing everything that they can to acquiesce, to not wind up the abuser, to not cause problems with the abuser, trying to make the arrangements fit, give some kind of contact. It's a very different situation to high conflict parenting. But the court very quickly, because they've not looked at the allegations of domestic abuse, that didn't mean it didn't happen. It's just that the court have said, well, that was historic, or whatever they've said, and we're going to move on. And the consequential problem of that is when CAFCAS and the abusive personality get hold of that, then because there's no evidence of abuse, we assume it's high conflict parenting, but it isn't. And abusers love that term. They love to refer to the difficulties in the co-parenting relationship as because of high conflict. The mother, gender specific, won't let go of the past and these things that happened. And we've just got to move forward for the children, says the abuser. And so we do. The abuser controls this, hides this, manipulates this during the proceedings, acts like the doting parent, acts as though that, they may even realise the errors of their ways, and going forward it's going to be different. The problem is when the courts buy into this, then this case is flawed. Going forward, the domestic abuse carries on, and then the case returns to court. So each case where domestic abuse is being left to carry on, and it keeps bouncing back to court and coming back to court, and judges getting so impatient saying, oh, well, this is the 5th time this has been back to court, it's because it's not dealt with the domestic abuse at the start by checking the evidence, looking to see what's really going on. And so the problem is circular because the volume of cases coming into the family justice system are these cases bouncing back. And the solution is to look at the evidence when there's allegations of domestic abuse or allegations that it's all parental alienation and made up, whichever, to look at the allegations, to look at the evidence right from the start. And then that would stop things coming back to court if it was dealt with properly. So that's how I've talked about previous difficulties because of the volume of caseload, and how it's a circular problem because it puts pressure on the courts to deal with cases quickly, and then those cases return, hence the volume increases. What we have now post-lockdown is a difficulty in that we've got a backlog of cases and the volume of cases. So it's even more difficult for the family court to be able to deal with that. And I'm already seeing and hearing just before, a couple of weeks before we made this episode, on social media, I was just asking people for their experiences with the actual procedure of the court process in private children law. So a few people, very quick to point out that there were delays, and that was fairly obvious that was going to happen. One of the delays in particular just recently is at gatekeeping, and if you remember from my previous videos, this is where the application is received and then a date will be set, the urgency is assessed, the application sent to the respondent, to CAFCAS, and the matters listed for a first hearing dispute resolution appointment. That's from gatekeeping. So there's a lot of delays at gatekeeping at the moment, and that is because court staff will not have been there. Court staff are coming back. I've heard of courts actually holding on to physical post for 3 days before opening it, which is fair enough. So we've got that difficulty, staffing issues around there. Then there's timetabling and looking for dates for hearings, but we've already got all of these other things. Are they adjourning? Are they going ahead? So the court system, the court timetable is very difficult. That's expected. Also expected, a lot of people are having changes to their hearing type. So they thought they were having predominantly hearings in person. A lot of people reporting about the different changes to remote hearings and how that's affected them. Unexpected changes include reasons being given for decisions by the family court, including the volume of cases. So we're not fact-finding because we've got far too many other things to look at, and I think this, hearing that, getting the feeling that judges are just not willing to look at matters because they're already snowed under with other cases, so they're prioritising. And unless the family justice system is serious in its intent to deal with domestic abuse, it's got to stop prioritising basically the wrong way. So what it is doing is it's saying, oh well, you know, there's more serious cases happening. We're not going to look at a few nasty text messages. But that's indicative of something else. That's indicative of the much bigger problem that will keep the thing coming back to court and back to court. I think I've emphasised that probably enough. But these are the things that were reported back to me about the effect of the lockdown on the actual court process. And so far, I think I've managed to be the voice of doom and gloom completely about how the delays are going to be made worse. However, I'm going to end on a positive here, which is how the episodes are going from this point, and one of the things that we are looking at, which I think is going to impact on the family court, on the family justice system and all professionals in it, but we have to keep the pressure on. This is referring to a report on the risk of harm to parents and children in private family law proceedings in the UK, well, in England and Wales. And it's produced by the Ministry of Justice in June 2020, and this is a vital piece of information, so I am going to devote quite a few episodes to this. The first one's going to be an overview about what it shows, and then we're going to look at the different things in more detail, such as the voice of the child and whether or not enough weight is placed on what children want in these kind of situations, such as the assumptions about, you know, that both parents should be involved no matter what. That's the, you know, pro-contact view, and about evidence checking. It does reinforce a lot of things that we've been saying on the Survivor Diaries, so as you can imagine, I shall be devoting quite a bit of time to that. I'm not just going to leave that there though. If you are already in child arrangements proceedings, we are going to pop a link to this below. It is the Ministry of Justice assessing the risk of harm to children and parents in private law children cases final report, published in June of this year, and we'll pop the link to that below. Okay, so I think this is where we are as far as lockdown eases on the 19th of July 2020. If you have any comments about this or future episodes, you can leave them on the comments in this video, or you can email us directly at survivordiaries.uk@gmail.com, and we will try to cover any comments in upcoming episodes. Okay, thank you for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in the next episode and or vlog for the Survivor Diaries. Thank you very much, and goodbye.